There are players in your fantasy league who are performing at unsustainable levels, which means that the air is about to be let out of the balloon here with these players, and you don't want to be left holding the bag. So let's break down these players that you need to trade away to your league mates in fantasy football. And we'll begin with Alexander Mattison, who in week 3, the usage remained strong and he finally performed. Mattison saw season high snaps at 79%, as you can see on Fantasy Life right here, and he earned 87% of the rushing attempts. These are elite numbers. It led to his first big day where he saw 25 touches in total, and between his total yards rushing and receiving, 125 yards. He was efficient, finally, for like the first time in 2 years, averaging 5 yards per touch. So this is all great news, but here's why you kind of want to sell him. He's not going to find a better matchup this year than he did against the Chargers' 30th ranked run defense, and oh yeah, Cam Akers is now going to be involved in week 4. And when it comes to Cam Akers, as you can see right here, they only swapped draft picks to acquire him, and more specifically, they swapped a conditional 6th round pick for a conditional 7th round pick, so the Rams basically gave him away for free to the Vikings. But that all said, Akers is now on the Vikings. Doesn't really matter how he got there. He's there, and he's a similar talent to Alexander Mattison. Before his Achilles tear last year, Akers was definitely a more dynamic player than this version of Mattison. So I'm expecting Akers to immediately play at least 30% of the snaps, maybe closer to 40%, and Ty Chandler should still be involved for 5 to 10%, which would pull Alexander Mattison, who's been earning 76% of the snaps and nearly 80% of the rush attempts this year. It's probably going to pull him closer to like a 60% snap player. And this is concerning because he's been a largely inefficient player the last 2 to 3 years. So now if he's going to see like 5 less touches a game, yeah, it's going to be tougher for him to get there in fantasy. So if you can, I'd be trading him for somebody like Jerry Jeudy, who has a better outlook moving forward. Now, George Kittle is also coming off of his best game of the season in week 3 after struggling the first 2 weeks. Kittle was the tight end 3 overall in the week. Only 2 tight ends were better than him, Sam Laporta and Travis Kelce. He puts up 7 catches, 90 yards, 9 targets. This is a great game for 16 fantasy points. But there was a clear reason to why this happened on Thursday Night Football against the Giants. Brandon Ayuk was out. And as you can see from Travis May's tweet right here, historically, when Brandon Ayuk is out, George Kittle averages 36% more receiving yards. And that historic usage without Ayuk continued in week 3. As you can see from Fantasy Life, Kittle ended up seeing a season high 27% of the targets, those 9 targets that you saw from Brock Purdy and for this 49ers team. But the issue remains the same for Kittle. He's rarely the first read in this offense. Ayuk, Debo, and Christian McCaffrey, since McCaffrey joined the team last year, during that span, they all have a higher first read target share where the quarterback is looking right away to throw it than George Kittle. And part of this is because Kittle blocks more, and a lot of his routes are skewed because he's blocking and then releases, and it's kind of later in the play. It doesn't really lead to much. So there was major concern the first 2 games. If you're a fantasy owner of George Kittle, you know this. He only put up 49 total yards, if you could see, 19 and just 30, and this was in good matchups against the Rams and the Steelers. And then in week 3 with no Brandon Ayuk on a short week, Thursday Night Football against a bad Giants team, he finally got there, but now is your time to take advantage and sell him off this performance. If you want to trade him across the exact same position, which is not always the best move, I would actually trade him for Darren Waller, who's a nice buy low option. Now, the next man up is Isaiah Pacheco, the Kansas City Chiefs running back, who, yet again, the trend here, had his best game of the season in week 3. He ends up producing 78 total yards and nearly 16 fantasy points. He finds the end zone on 17 touches. And this is something that we said heading into this week. In my Yahoo content last week on this channel here specifically, we said he's in the best situation of the week as a 13-point favorite at home against the bad Bears defense. And this ended up playing out. Now, we have to dive into his usage because it's a little bit skewed. According to Fantasy Life's data, Isaiah Pacheco only played 43% of the snaps in week 3, which would actually be a season low, but this is because the game, if you watch this game, it became a blowout very quickly, and he actually didn't play the final quarter, or really the final drive or 2 of the game. So he actually did see around 50% of the snaps, but here's the deal. The matchup won't always be this good, and this is still a 3-headed backfield. Because in this game, Jerick McKinnon was involved. He had 2 early touchdowns, basically stolos from Pacheco, and then Clyde Edwards-Helaire, before the starters were pulled and the garbage time ensued, he saw 10 touches. So look, most weeks Pacheco is going to see 50% of the snaps, but he's not earning any of the passing down usage, which makes him a touchdown or bust player. He's yet to top 20 routes run in a game. He's seen 0 snaps in a 2-minute offense, and he's outside the top 30 running backs in receiving game usage. So look to sell Pacheco off this 16-point performance and find somebody who's not a touchdown or bust player. Now, the next man up is Courtland Sutton, and we were big Courtland Sutton lovers this whole offseason. He was like a 10th, 11th round pick at times, and as of right now, he is massively paying that off as the wide receiver 22 in fantasy. And there's nothing wrong with his performances, but now there's a good chance that you can upgrade him for a more stable piece. And there is literally no better time than now, with Sutton coming off a 21-point performance where he catches 8 balls, 91 yards, a touchdown on 11 targets. In week 3, 100% of his targets were actually catchable, which is a big difference last year with him and Russ, where only 70% of them were catchable. So all of this is great news. Why would you want to trade him? Well, the other receivers on his team are starting to see more usage. You have the rookie Marvin Mims, whose routes have increased every week. They doubled in week 3, and on just just 18 routes in the last 2 games. He's seen 190 yards, nearly 190 yards, and 2 total touchdowns. He's going to start seeing more usage as the year goes on over a guy like Brandon Johnson, who's the receiver ahead of him on the depth chart. And then there's Jerry Jeudy, who finally seems to be getting healthier after his second game, and that's just based on watching the tape. His yards after the catch looked a lot better. His overall route running, he looked more comfortable. He earned 7 targets, had a solid game. So look, Sutton's not bad, and this Broncos defense is terrible, meaning that the overall passing attack's gonna have to throw more, and Sutton's gonna see volume. But as I mentioned earlier, he's basically a top 20 receiver, 22nd right here through the first 3 games. This isn't going to keep up as the other receivers on the team start to see more usage. Jeudy starts to get healthier. I'd try and trade Courtland Sutton for somebody like maybe a Nico Collins or definitely a David Montgomery if you could pull that off. Next, we'll talk about a running back who is a major waiver priority. But before we get there, if you're enjoying this, make sure you hit the subscribe button because it'll allow you to see all my future content and beat your buddies in fantasy. Now, that waiver wire darling from just a week ago is Jerome Ford. And look, in his season debut with the Browns, he saw the starter usage. He played 55% of the snaps, and now according to Fantasy Life, he only had 33% of the rush attempts, but this is skewed because the game turned into a blowout late. Third string running back Pierre Strong ended up playing the entire final drive and seeing 5 carries, which skews the data. But if you take out the garbage time, Ford saw 13 opportunities, Hunt saw 8 opportunities, and Pierre Strong saw just 1. And this led to a solid game for Ford, 19 fantasy points, but a lot of it was skewed. He had 12 touches, he had over 50 yards, but a lot of it came from 1 nice touchdown reception. The issue was Kareem Hunt was actually on a snap count in this game, but still saw good usage despite being on a snap count. Now, if you look at the data, Hunt only played 21% of the snaps, but he actually accounted for 36% of the non-garbage time opportunities. We mentioned it earlier. He had 8 of the opportunities to 13 for Ford. So this makes me wonder what happens when Hunt starts to not be on a snap count and plays 40% of the snaps. This might get closer to a 50-50 touch split. And look, the Browns defense is the best in the league by far, so the running back should have some leads in the second half and be able to run the ball more. That's what this team wants to do. They want to run the ball. But if it's going to be closer to a 50-50 split, you might be able to sell Jerome Ford off of this performance for somebody who has a much better role coming off of a bad performance like Kyren Williams. Now, next up, I want to talk about the Miami backfield. We can talk about Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert, who are obviously coming off of great games, but you might be able to actually upgrade them now. They're like a no way I'm trading these types of players after their 45 and 50 point performances, but this is where you can get top dollar. Because let me tell you something, I've been tracking the trades. You can see all the recent trades in the trade market on Yahoo Fantasy, and there's some wild things happening. This is what it looks like right here, and let's just focus in on one of these trades, the 1-for-1 trade here. Devon Achane, as you can see on the bottom of the screen, he's going right now in a 1-for-1 trade. He went for Calvin Ridley, which is crazy. Ridley is like a second-round pick if we were to redraft today. He's a top 20 player in my rest of season rankings. And some other guys I've seen him traded for on this tool, Chris Olave, Jamar Chase, Travis Etienne, Josh Jacobs. It is crazy the fever people have for Achane. All those guys I just named, I definitely want for the rest of the season over Achane, and it's not even close. Achane would be like an 8th round pick if we redrafted today, maybe 7th round. All those other guys I said are like 1st to 3rd to 4th rounders. Now, obviously, Achane's great. He's a flex option for you in fantasy. He just put up 50 points, but he's not going to face the Broncos, who miss 24 tackles every week. And we're just a few weeks away from Jeff Wilson getting back, which I don't think Jeff Wilson's going to come in and see 60% of the snaps, but he'll probably see at least 20, 30, 40% of the snaps in most of the games, which is just going to cut into all the running backs' workload. Now, if you were curious, Raheem Mostert also has a pretty strong trade value right now. I mean, we could look at some of the trades he's going for. 1-for-1, he's going for Josh Jacobs. Give me Josh Jacobs instead. And as I scrolled through this list, I was seeing other names like Stephon Diggs, AJ Brown, and Ramondre Stevenson as 1-for-1 trades for Mostert. The Dolphins' offense is fantastic. They're the talk of the town, the best offense in the NFL by far. You can maybe sell as high as possible for some 1st and 2nd round talents on these running backs right now. Now, another player you might be able to get some top end value for back is Christian Kirk right now, who did draw the start in week 3 because Zay Jones was out. And in that game, you saw elite usage. He operated as a starting wide receiver, playing on the outside, seeing a season high 91% of the routes. This led to a 15% target share, so not great 15% target share, but it was still 6 overall targets, which is solid. And for the 2nd straight week, Christian Kirk was the best wide receiver in fantasy from this team because he found the end zone on his 6 targets, 15.5 fantasy points, 4 catches, and 54 yards. Now, not only did he benefit from Zay Jones being out, but once again, Calvin Ridley missed like 10 to 15% of this game, dealing with a nagging injury from last week. And Zay Jones was ruled out on Friday. He's dealing with a knee injury, and if you look at the injury report from last week, DNP did not participate. He missed practice every single day. He was not close to playing in this game. He might actually miss another week here. So there's a chance that Kirk is going to start yet again in week 4 against Atlanta, but that's a slower paced game. It's not the best game environment. He might not put up a good game, which at that point you could lose your window to sell him. So I think right now is the best time coming off of back-to-back solid fantasy days. And by the way, once Zay Jones does return, which if he ends up playing in week 4, it could go right back to the week 1 poor usage. It probably will, where he was a slot only player. 66% of the routes run, only played 59% of the snaps, led to 1 target. This is a complete flip from what you're getting right now because the other receivers are banged up. And now when Kirk has been out there on a per route basis, his efficiency, it's been fine. Not great, just fine. Kirk ranks 38th in wide receiver efficiency through 3 games. Now, if you're curious on what the market is for him, right here you can see on Yahoo, he's going trades, 1-for-1 trades with guys like James Cook. I saw a Ramondre Stevenson on here. If you could pull off something like that, get yourself a top 15 running back for Christian Kirk, definitely do it. And you definitely want to acquire the fantasy blueprint, because if you want to win your fantasy league and smack around your friends, this is for you. That one was kind of hard. Every single day of the week, I'll be sending you a tool that will help you prepare for the week and win your week, whether it's the waiver wire tool, whether it's the rest of season rankings, projections and rankings for that specific week, or the game-by-game matchup notes, every single fantasy relevant player's matchup notes, and a lot more for that week. This is just $5 for the entire year, and if you don't make your fantasy playoffs, this is what I do. It's risk-free. I just refund that $5. So you either make your fantasy playoffs with these tools, or you get your $5 back. Why not do it? The blueprint's extremely simple to get. Thousands of people are already using it, and if you want to join them and get access now, just scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description below. Now, the next man up is Brian Robinson, and we talked about him last week. You had to sell high on him last week when he was a top 5 fantasy producer, because this usage wasn't going to continue, and that's what we saw in week 3. The usage was very concerning. Yes, he saw 10 carries to just 2 for Antonio Gibson, but it wasn't the carries, it was the snaps. Robinson saw a season low 37% of the snaps. This is a massive drop off from his 58 and 55%, and it's because the Commanders got down. Sam Howell was sacked a bunch. He had 4 interceptions. They were playing from behind the whole game, and Brian Robinson came off the field. Because as it was last year, Antonio Gibson remains the passing down back on this team. You could see his snaps went up in week 3 from 37 and 45% to a game where they were trailing 63% of the snaps. Now, he didn't play all that well. He didn't even see a lot of usage. He had a fumble in this game, but still, he is their passing down guy. Now, we were told in camp that, oh, Robinson's going to catch more passes. We saw a little bit of it in the preseason of, oh, maybe there's a little glimpse here of him doing that. That's not what we got, though. And if that's going to be the case, the Commanders are going to probably trail in a lot of games, which means Robinson is just kind of a touchdown or bust player like in Isaiah Pacheco we talked about earlier. So I hope you traded him last week when he had a big week, because 7 points isn't going to be an encouraging thing to look at, but at least when you're trying to do your sales pitch on why you should trade him, you could say, hey, it was worst case scenario. They got down big. 4 interceptions won't happen again from Sam Howell, and he still had 10 carries for 70 yards. Was still massively efficient, 7 yards per touch. Look, I have a couple running backs. You can have him if you want. I need a receiver. Something along those lines. Now, in reality, like I said, the Commanders are probably going to trail a lot, and he's a touchdown or bust player, so try and sell him for somebody like a Kyren Williams. Now, the next man up is George Pickens, the Steelers wide receiver. And here's the thing. The Pittsburgh offense looked a lot better in week 3. Kenny Pickett was averaging 8.5 yards per attempt, and they were using Kenny Pickett and the running backs in ways that fit their skill sets. Because of this, for the second straight week, Pickens had a good game. He ended up running 100% of the routes, earning 24% of the targets. That led to a 6-target performance, 4 catches, 75 yards, and he's being used all over the field now, not just on the outside as a jump ball receiver. If you were to look at just the 2 games without Deontay Johnson on fantasy right here, you can see he's run 97% of the routes and earned 29% of the Steelers' targets. This would rank top 5 amongst wide receivers last year. He's been elite without Deontay. But that's the key. Without Deontay, Deontay can be returning any week now, and when Deontay plays, George Pickens is under a 15% target share. That means his volume historically literally gets cut in half than what you've seen the past 2 weeks. And he doesn't have the easiest schedule coming up. Like, the Texans look like an easy matchup, but if they're healthy, which they weren't last week, and their secondary still performed against the Jaguars, that's a tough matchup if they're healthy. The Ravens is a tough matchup. The Rams is not one of the best matchups that you can have for a secondary. And we just saw that in week 3, they held the Bengals to just 19 points despite not having any name brands in their secondary. So the matchup is tough. And look, here's the deal. I think Pickens is a great player. It's not about that. It's about the value. It's about the market that you're in fantasy football. He's top 25 in efficiency. He's producing after the catch. He's being used in better ways, but this is all with Deontay out, and Deontay's going to be back maybe in a week, maybe in 2 weeks. So if you want to try and level up George Pickens right now, I'd try and get Tyler Lockett off a bad game, or heck, maybe you can shoot for a Zay Flowers. Now let's discuss a veteran in Adam Thielen, who he has had a great 2-week stretch. 2 weeks ago with Bryce Young as his quarterback, he puts up 20 points, and then last week with a new quarterback in Andy Dalton, he puts up over 30 points. But here's the deal. This is massively skewed because Dalton in week 3 threw 58 times. That led to 14 targets for Adam Thielen, probably double the amount of pass attempts you can actually expect, which would be like 30 from Andy Dalton, meaning double the amount of targets you can actually expect from Adam Thielen most weeks. And the issue is Adam Thielen needs these 10 to 15 target games to actually produce because of where he's seeing his targets. According to Player Profiler stats, Adam Thielen's average target distance, his ADOT, is just 6.2 yards right now. He's being targeted on average 6 yards downfield, 87th in the NFL. And this is a fine role if you can pick up yards after the catch. Like, we're literally seeing Michael Pittman be a top 10 fantasy receiver with a similar role, but he's picking up yards after the catch, and he has just a better coaching staff. Here's the spoiler alert for you. The 33-year-old Adam Thielen isn't playing dynamic after the catch, picking up yards and showing bursts. No, he has just 27 yards after the catch, 45th in the NFL right now. And this is on heavy volume. If you just account for a per target basis, he's outside the top 100 players. So the air is about to come out of the balloon for an Adam Thielen. I'd try and trade him for a guy off a bad week like Nico Collins, or heck, maybe you can get like an Elijah Moore. Now let's talk about some of the other players who are trending players that I would trade away on the CBS's top rankings. We just saw Puka Nacua have another good game. He puts up 70 plus yards, but Cooper Kupp is like 2 weeks away from returning. I've been saying when he was peak value last week, you should be trading him. Now he maybe doesn't have as much value, but I still think he's worth the trade. He's a top 50 player the rest of the season, but he's not the top 20 player that he has. Now we talked about Isaiah Pacheco on this screen, but I want to talk about Dameon Pierce because he found the end zone, and that's all you really could get out of him. This team, they might have a better offense, which means he might start to see more red zone usage, but they're still using 3 running backs, and he's not seeing the passing game usage. He has really no upside. He's a touchdown or bust player on a team with 3 running backs being used. That's similar usage to what you're seeing from Isaiah Pacheco like we talked about earlier, but Pacheco plays for the Chiefs, who are in the red zone a lot, and I don't think we can bank on that with the Texans. Now the next man worth trading in my opinion is Jahmyr Gibbs. Maybe you want to do it after Thursday Night Football. He has a good matchup against the Packers if David Montgomery doesn't return, but look, Jahmyr Gibbs, we've seen it. He's going to catch a lot of passes. He's going to have a couple of explosive runs, but it's evident that they need David Montgomery back on the ground on early downs after week 3 and definitely in the red zone. I think Gibbs will finish as a top 20 running back because of his pass catching upside, but if you're finding somebody who might trade you like a James Cook for him, go and do it. Now, somebody to kick the tires on is Kenneth Walker, who has been great so far this season. If you can get a top end running back for him, I would go ahead and try and do that. But Kenneth Walker very quietly is not seeing the passing downs. That's the rookie Zach Charbonnet, and Zach Charbonnet has been a much more efficient rusher than Kenneth Walker on his touches. Again, Walker has been great. He's scoring a bunch of touchdowns. This is a good offense, but he has a similar role to last year when he was just the early down back. If he doesn't keep up that insane efficiency, he's just going to start to mellow back towards being like the RB 15 to 20. So these are the players that you want to trade away before week 4 begins. And if you want to see the guys that you should maybe be trading them for, the guys you want to actually acquire, check out this video right here. I appreciate you tuning in. If you found this helpful, make sure to hit the subscribe button. It takes 2 seconds of your time, and 50% of the people who watch these videos aren't subscribed, so please do change that. You'll get to see all my future content too. Schmack around your buddies.